We welcome you all to our morning Bible study. We have come to the eighth verse of the seventh chapter of Acts. And as I shared on Monday, verse 2 to verse 53 is the message that Stephen gave to Sanhedrin, recounting the history of Israel, in fact, covering from 1700 BC or 1950 BC to the time of Christ. The entire history of Israel from Abraham till the coming of Christ. It's a very excellent summary identifying specific salient incidents in the history of Israel, reminding the Sanhedrin about their past, culminating in the Lord Jesus Christ coming in fulfillment of the prophecy. And we come to the eighth verse. I'll go on to the ninth verse. Eighth verse, he writes, tells them about, it was 8, then God gave Abraham the covenant of circumcision. Abraham became father of Isaac and circumcised him 8 days after his birth. Isaac became father of Jacob. Jacob became father of the 12 patriarchs. And Jacob, as you know, his name was changed to Israel. And verse 9 onwards, it continue. Because the patriarchs were jealous of Joseph, they sold him as a slave into Egypt. The patriarchs are basically the other sons of Jacob. He had 12 sons and one daughter, Dinah. And apart from Joseph, there was Reuben, Simeon, Judah, Levi, Issachar, Zebulun, Dan, Naphtali, Gad, Asher, and Benjamin. And the elder brothers of Joseph were very jealous of him because Joseph spoke about the dreams he had. And he was very straightforward and very transparent. He shared about the dreams he had. And because he was the favorite of his dad, the brothers are very jealous of him and they sold him as a slave to the Midianites. Midianites were actually people who are part of Saudi Arabia. And Midian is actually northern part of the Red Sea. When the Israelites crossed with Moses across the Red Sea, they landed in Midian, in Saudi Arabia. And the descendants of Midians are basically today's descendants of Ishmael. And they sold him a slave into Egypt. But basically, Midianites sold him into Egypt. But God was with him, verse 9, and rescued him from all his troubles. He gave Joseph wisdom and enabled him to gain the goodwill of Pharaoh, king of Egypt. So he made him ruler over Egypt and all his palace. God was with Joseph. Now in Romans 8:32 it says, 31 it says, if God be for us, who can be against us? And when we understand God is for us, we also understand everybody in the world is in God's hands. In Psalm 24, verse 1, it says, the earth is the Lord, everything that is in it, the world and all the people live in it. So everybody in the world is in God's hands. The Egyptians were in God's hands. In fact, when the people came from Egypt under Moses later on, God tells Moses to tell the Israelite women to ask the Egyptian neighbors, ask them for silver, gold, and clothing. And God says, I will move their hearts to give it to you. I will move their hearts to give gold, silver, and clothing to you. Exodus 3:21. So everybody in the world is in God's hands. Anyone he can use. So he used Egyptian Pharaoh leaders to make Joseph prime minister of Egypt, so to speak, because God was with Joseph. Very important lesson for us. It says in the book of Proverbs, 16 chapter verse 7, when a man's ways are pleasing to God, he makes even his enemies live at peace. God had a great plan for Joseph. Later on, we read about how after the father Jacob died, and the brothers very scared of Joseph, just in case he will take revenge upon them. They tell Joseph, the 50th chapter of Genesis, verse 19, before our father died, he told us to tell you to forgive us. Actually, Joseph forgiven them many years earlier, 17 years earlier. Then accept the forgiveness. And Joseph says, don't be afraid. Am I in the place of God? You intended to harm me, but God intended for the good, for saving many lives. So the patriarchs sold Joseph to the Midianites and then to Egypt, and they intended to harm him. But the same thing they did, God used for the saving of many lives. So in everything, God works together for the good of those who love God and according to his purpose. Romans 8:28. We see the life of Joseph. God was with Joseph and used even the Egyptian Pharaoh who worship idols to lift up Joseph in the land of Egypt. So God gave Joseph wisdom, enabled him to gain the goodwill of Pharaoh, king of Egypt. So he made him ruler over Egypt and all his palace. Verse 11. Then famine struck all Egypt and Canaan, bringing great suffering, and our fathers could not find food. It's an interesting story. The whole, the 50s verse is an interesting story. So that's why we're going very fast. There's not so much theology in it, but history of Israel and how God was with Joseph. And we learn from that, how when we walk with God, God will ultimately lift us up and make everything beautiful. Verse 12. When Jacob heard there was grain in Egypt, he sent our fathers on their first visit. Our fathers meaning the patriarchs, the remaining 10 of them. Benjamin was actually in Canaan, but the other brothers were sent by the father to Egypt because he heard Egypt has grain. The famine, 7 years of famine, he heard there's grain in Egypt, so go and get grain. On the second visit, Joseph told his brothers who he was, and Pharaoh learned about Joseph's family. After this, Joseph sent for his father Jacob and his whole family, 75 in all. 75 people went to Egypt at that time. And many years later, when they returned, when God rescued them from Egyptians' hands, from Pharaoh's hand, how many came? 602,000 men, young men, apart from elders, women, and children. 602,000. And according to Bible scholars, there are totally about 2 million people. 75 went, they multiplied, and ultimately approximately 2 million people were rescued by God from Egypt and brought to the land of Canaan under the leadership of Moses. 75 went. Verse 15. Then Jacob went down to Egypt, where he and our fathers died. Their bodies were brought back to Shechem and placed in the tomb that Abraham had bought from the sons of Hamor at Shechem for a certain sum of money. Now you begin to wonder, so many years later, how can the body be brought? The bones were brought. I'm going to request, who's going to read today? Sushma is going to read the Bible?
Yes.
Okay. Could you read Genesis chapter, let me explain, which verses? Genesis chapter 50, 24 to 25 and 26. 24, 25, 26. Verse 25 basically, but you can read it. 24, 25, 26.
Genesis chapter 50, 24 to 26. Then Joseph said to his brothers, I am about to die, but God will surely come to your aid and take you up out of this land to the land he promised on oath to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And Joseph made the sons of Israel swear an oath and said, God will surely come to your aid, and then you must carry my bones up from this place.
Yeah, carry my bones. Now, very often I shared with you about how when in the Jewish form of burial, or not really burial, of keeping the body, is to put it in a cave. Even during Jesus' time, it was like that. Cover the cave with a stone and allow the body to decay. After 1 year, they roll the stone away, open the cave, and only bones will remain. And they'll gather the bones and bury the bones. The bones were buried, but the body used to decay, not buried underground. Normally we say burial, in a burial ground, we put the body under the ground today. But it's not like that among the Jews. Even Jesus' body is put in a cave, Joseph of Arimathea's cave. And then on the third day, the angel rolled away the stone. It's after 1 year removing the stone. The third day, the angel did not roll away the stone. And he rose from the dead. But in the case of the patriarchs and all the Jews, they put the body inside. After some time, the bones will be buried. So Joseph knew by faith they'll come out of Egypt. He told his brothers, make sure my bones are carried and buried in Shechem. Bones will be buried in Shechem. We see it actually happened. Could read 24th chapter of Joshua, last chapter, 24th chapter of Joshua, verse 32. This is about how they after came from Egypt and they settled the land of Canaan. What happened with the bones of Joseph?
Joshua 24, verse 32. And Joseph's bones, which the Israelites had brought up from Egypt, were buried at Shechem in the tract of land that Jacob bought for 100 pieces of silver from the sons of Hamor, the father of Shechem.
Yeah, so by faith, Joseph knew that they'll all go back to Egypt. They won't be in Egypt all the time. And then he tells, brother, please take my bones. And sure enough, Moses brought the bones and then they buried it in Shechem, as is mentioned in the Bible. Let's go on. Verse 17. As the time drew near for God to fulfill his promise to Abraham, the number of our people in Egypt greatly increased. It only became 602,000. Mentioned in the book of Numbers, chapter 2. But actually, about 2 million people, because 602,000 were men on foot, not apart from the women and children and the elders. Then another king who knew nothing about Joseph became ruler of Egypt. He dealt treacherously with our people and oppressed our forefathers by forcing them to throw out their newborn babies so that they would die. At that time, Moses was born. He was no ordinary child. For 3 months, he was cared for in his father's house. When he was placed outside, Pharaoh's daughter took him and brought him up as her own son. Now, when the decree was given that all the children should be killed, Moses' mother put him in a basket and sent him along the river Nile. His sister was supposed to watch this basket with the baby going down the river Nile. Who picked up the basket? That was Pharaoh's daughter. And she brought up Moses in Pharaoh's court. All this part of God's plan. I told you how everybody in the world is in God's hands. And God used Pharaoh's daughter to pick up that basket of this baby. And Moses brought up. He was not an ordinary child. He was a very special child. And he was brought up on Pharaoh's court. And that's where he grew up. Much later we find, to the end of his life, when he's 120 years old, he makes an amazing statement. Moses, book of Deuteronomy, 30th chapter, verse 27. Shusmak, read that. Book of Deuteronomy, 30th chapter, verse 27.
Deuteronomy 33, verse 27. The eternal God is your refuge, and underneath are the everlasting arms. He will drive out your enemy before you, saying, destroy him.
Okay. Eternal God refuge underneath the everlasting arms. Now just imagine when he sent down the river Nile, when Pharaoh's daughter found the baby, it says in the Bible, the baby was crying. He was crying. Now, this basket was sent down the river Nile, and those days the river Nile was full of crocodiles. And the waves must have been buffeted. The waves have buffeted the river, the waves, and it was moving up and down the basket. And the child must have got confused. And, like when you fly in the aircraft, we have turbulence, no? And maybe we started getting nervous about turbulence. Same way, there must have been turbulence for the little baby. He's crying. But just imagine God preserved this child because underneath the basket were the everlasting arms of the Lord. 120 years later, Moses recounts his past. He realized he's going to die now. Very soon he's going to go to heaven. He told everyone, I'm going to go. He knew fully well he's going to die. And going back to 120 years earlier, how when the baby was in the river, it did not topple. The basket did not topple, not swallowed by crocodiles. God preserved this child. He is eternal God, a refuge underneath the everlasting arms. Under the basket were the arms of the Lord who preserved Moses through the turbulence of the river Nile. And who picked up the baby? Pharaoh's daughter. He was brought up by Pharaoh's daughter. Now look at this. Next verse. Very interesting verse. I want to spend some time on this. Verse 22. Moses was educated in all the wisdom of the Egyptians and was powerful in speech and action. Very interesting, isn't it? You remember what Moses told God when God called him to go and bring the Israelites out? He gave so many excuses. One excuse was, I'm slow of speech and tongue. I've never been eloquent, neither since the past nor just spoken to servant. Shani, could you read 4th chapter of Exodus, verse 10, 11, and 12? Exodus 4, 10, 11, 12.
Exodus chapter 4, verse 10 to 12. Moses said to the Lord, O Lord, I have never been eloquent, neither in the past nor since you have spoken to your servant. I am slow of speech and tongue. The Lord said to him, Who gave man his mouth? Who makes him deaf or mute? Who gives him sight or makes him blind? Is it not I, the Lord? Now go, I will help you speak and will teach you what to say. But Moses said, O Lord, please send someone else to do it. Then the Lord's anger burned against Moses, and he said, What about your brother Aaron the Levite? I know he can speak well. He is already on his way to meet you, and his heart will be glad when he sees you.
Okay. Now, at what age was Moses when God called him to go and bring his Israelites out? He was approximately 80 years old. 80 years old. At the age of 40, how was Moses? Age of 40, he was educated, all wisdom Egyptians, and powerful in speech and action. Age of 80, when God called him, what does he say? I've never been eloquent, neither in the past, which is spoken to 7. Is he lying to God? Age of 40 was so powerful in speech and action. Action powerful, speech powerful. He's an orator, trained by the Egyptians to be having the wisdom of the Egyptians, powerful speaker, powerful man of action. Age of 80, what does he say? I've never been eloquent. Even in the past, I've never been eloquent. I'm slow of speech and tongue. What happened? Is he lying to God? No, he's not lying. What happened was God took away Egyptian wisdom. He took away the powerful speech of Moses. And so much so, Moses even forgot he had it. In 40 years' time, he forgot what he was at the age of 40. Age of 80, I've never been eloquent. God took away Egyptian wisdom and gave him God's wisdom. His life is divided in 3 parts. Moses, 40, 40, 40. Age of 40, powerful leader in Egypt, powerful in speech, powerful in action, trained to be the next Pharaoh maybe, full of Egyptian wisdom. Age of 80, 0, all the Egyptian wisdom went away, can't speak, slow speech and tongue. Age of 40, Egyptian hero. Age of 80, 0. Age of 120, God's hero. How was Moses' words at the age of 120? Could you read the book of Deuteronomy, 32nd chapter, 46, 47? Sushma? Deuteronomy 32, 46, 47.
Deuteronomy
32 verses 46 and 47.
Deuteronomy 32 verses 46 and 47. He said to them, Take to heart all the words I have solemnly declared to you this day, so that you may command your children to obey carefully all the words of this law. They are not just idle words for you, they are your life. By them you will live long in the land you are crossing the Jordan to possess.
They're not idle words, they are your life. He spoke living words from God to the Israelites at the age of 120. Age of 40, Egyptian wisdom. Age of 80, 0. Age of 120, God's wisdom and God's power and God's word. That's why life is divided. Now, what happened at the age of 80? In the 40 years before that, how did he lose that powerful speech? He was talking to sheep. He was talking to sheep. 140 years he was talking to sheep. Sheep didn't talk to him. They didn't tell him what a wonderful speaker you are, what a great speaker you are. They couldn't do anything. Age of 40, everyone must have praised him. Oh, what a wonderful wisdom is God. How powerful speaker, powerful man he is. And then next 40 years, he was talking to sheep. And that 40 years of wilderness experience, he lost the Egyptian wisdom and powerful speech and forgot he even had it. So God brought him down to 0 and then built him up in the next 40 years. At the end of it, he speaks words of living words passed on to people. Tell me, they are your life. They're not idle words. By them you live long in the river Jordan, in the land crossing the river Jordan to possess. Now, why is it that Moses gave so many excuses? Now, I'm going to spend some time on this. It's very important to understand this. You begin to wonder, such a wonderful man of God, why he kept on delaying and finding excuses not to go to Egypt. Again, can you open this passage? We'll go slowly. Sushma, please go to the 3rd chapter of Exodus. Keep that page with you and look at different verses there. First, we'll read the 3rd chapter, verse 10, 11, and 12. Exodus 3, 10, 11, 12.
Exodus chapter 3, verses 10 to 12. So now go, I'm sending you to Pharaoh to bring my people, the Israelites, out of Egypt. But Moses said to God, who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the Israelites out of Egypt? And God said, I will be with you, and this will be the sign to you that it is I who have sent you. When you have brought the people out of Egypt, you will worship God on this mountain.
The first excuse was, who am I that I should go? God told him, I will be with you. Look at 13 and 14 verse.
Moses said to God, suppose I go to the Israelites and say to them, the God of your fathers has sent me to you, and they ask me, what is his name? Then what shall I tell them? God said to Moses, I am who I am. This is what you are to say to the Israelites.
Okay, first excuse was, who am I that I should go? I'll be with you. God gave the answer. If I'm going to ask them, if they're going to tell them and ask, who sent you? What's his name? What should I say? I am that I am. Then 3rd excuse was, what if they don't believe me? Read the 4th chapter, verse 1 and 2.
Exodus 4, verse 1 and 2, Moses answered, what if they do not believe me or listen to me and say, the Lord did not appear to you? Then the Lord said to him, what is that in your hand? A staff, he replied. The Lord said,
reading till that talks about the leprosy and also the snake, the rod became snake. God gave a sign to Moses that he would do miracles for them to believe. Can we keep reading till that few more verses?
Sure. The Lord said, throw it on the ground. Moses threw it on the ground and it became a snake and he ran from it. Then the Lord said to him, reach out your hand and take it by the tail. So Moses reached out and took hold of the snake, and it turned back into a staff in his hand. This, said the Lord, is so that they may believe that the Lord, the God of their fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob has appeared to you. Then the Lord said, put your hand inside your cloak. So Moses put his hand into his cloak, and when he took it out, it was leprous like snow. Now put it back into your cloak, he said. So Moses put his hand back into his cloak, and when he took it out, it was restored like the rest of his flesh. Then the Lord said, if they do not believe you or pay attention to the first miraculous sign, they may believe the second. But if they do not believe these 2 signs or listen to you, take some water from the Nile and pour it on the dry ground. The water you take from the river will become blood on the ground.
Okay, just stop there for a moment. Now, 3rd excuse was, what if they don't believe me? And God showed Moses, demonstrated how we'll do miracles through Moses. And based on the miracle, they will believe that God sent Moses. 3 excuses. One more 4th excuse he gave, which we just now read, 4th chapter 10, 11, 12. Oh, I can't speak. I am slow of speech and tongue. I'm not eloquent. I've never been eloquent even in the past. And God said, I will give you word. Who gave you mouth to speak? I'll give you. Why did he give all the excuses? 4 excuses, one by one. There's a reason for that. There's something underlining factor which made him hesitant to go to Egypt. I'll tell you what happened. God tells Moses in the 4th chapter of Exodus, verse 19 and 20. They'll give the answer why he hesitated, why he kept on giving excuses. Even Moses made excuses. Why? There's some reason for that. And God knew that. Please read 4th chapter, Exodus, verse 19, 20.
Exodus 4, 19 and 20. Now the Lord had said to Moses in Midian, go back to Egypt, for all the men who wanted to kill you are dead. So Moses took his wife and sons, put them on a donkey, and started back to Egypt. And he took the staff of God in his hand.
Okay, that's the reason why he did not go and hesitated and give excuses. He was scared. He goes back. There are people out there waiting to kill him. Because he came away from Egypt only because he killed an Egyptian, and the Israelites said, oh, you killed an Egyptian yesterday, do you want to kill us also? And he got scared. He thought because they killed the Egyptian, they'll take revenge. He ran away from there. 40 years he was a fugitive. Then God says, go back. Didn't want to go back. He's thinking those people are still alive. If I go back, they will kill me. And God tells them very clearly, those who are trying to kill you are now dead. So Moses went. God told them in the very beginning, said, no, Moses, go back. You are thinking they're going to kill you. They're not all dead only. God didn't tell that. You want to see what Moses would do. A lesson for us that don't give excuses to God when he asks you to do something. Behind the excuse could be an underlying reason why you don't want to do it. Obeying God, all that matters. In Proverbs 16:7 is written, when a man's ways are pleasing to God, he makes even his enemies live at peace. What a simple statement, but so profound. The case of Moses, there are no enemies. The enemies were dead. He's thinking they're still there. If I go back, they will kill me. God tells him, those who are trying to kill you are now dead. So Moses left. The ultimate hurdle was removed. The real underlying reason not going back was removed by God. He said, they're not there anymore. So a lesson we learned from this is when God says something, we simply do it. Because when a ways are pleasing to God, he makes even his enemies live at peace. In the case of Moses, the enemy was dead. In our case, we may have some enemies, but they are alive. But God granted us favor on the side of our enemies. So very important verse to understand this. Acts 7:22. He was a powerful speaker at the age of 40. Age of 80, nothing. Age of 120, he became a hero for God and for his people. And he was chosen along with Elijah to appear on the Mount of Transfiguration to Jesus. Very special man of God. Faithful, a servant in God's house. Even though faithful as a son of God in God's house, Moses was faithful as a servant in God's house. Of course, Christ is far above everybody else. But Moses compared to be faithful as a servant in God's house. Okay, let's go to what's the time now? 20, yeah, I think we are close in a minute. Verse 23. When Moses was 40 years old, he decided to visit his fellow Israelites. He saw one of them being mistreated by an Egyptian, so he went to his defense and avenged him by killing the Egyptian. Moses thought that his own people would realize that God was using him to rescue them, but they did not. The next day, Moses came upon two Israelites who were fighting. He tried to reconcile them by saying, men, you are brothers, why do you want to hurt each other? But the man who was mistreating the other person pushed Moses aside and said, who may rule and judge over us? Do you want to kill me as you killed the Egyptian yesterday? When Moses heard this, he fled to Midian, where he settled as a foreigner and had 2 sons. Now, this is the reason why he didn't want to go back. He fled. That question put him, do you want to kill me as you killed the Egyptian yesterday? Actually, Moses took the defense of the Israelites, but the Israelites only told him, you want to kill us as you killed the Egyptian yesterday? Moses left that place, ran away. Where he settled as a foreigner and had 2 sons. We'll finish at verse 29. Verse 30 we will do on Friday. After 40 years had passed. So this happened when he was 40 years old. He ran away. And after 40 years, age of 80, God called Moses through a burning bush. Very interesting, we'll find that when he joined the Israelites at the age of 40, there was a reason for that. He joined the Israelites for the sake of Christ. For the sake of Christ. Where was Christ there? God introduced himself to Moses at the age of 80 only. I'm the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Age of 40, he made a choice. I'll talk about that on Friday. And but meanwhile, you can read a book of Hebrews, chapter 11. Please read from verse 24 to 27, and we'll discuss that on Friday. Hebrews 11, 24, 27, where Moses left Pharaoh's court for some reason, for the sake of Christ itself, sake of Christ. So we read that and then come back on Friday and we'll discuss. God bless you all.